My mom confessed on her deathbed that my twin brother was never my brother, and my dad still refuses to explain. By the time I reached the hospital, my phone was still buzzing in my pocket with missed calls and unread messages. I ignored all of them. I just focused on the smell. Hospitals all smell the same. That sharp, artificial clean that never quite covers the faint sweetness of sickness underneath. It hit me as soon as the elevator doors opened, and for a second I just stood there, staring at the beige hallway, thinking about how absurd it was that my mother might die surrounded by this color. Dad was already there. I knew it was him from the way his shoulders hunched forward, as if he was trying to fold into himself and disappear into the plastic chair outside her room. He was staring at the floor. His eyes were dry. I walked up and asked if he had gone in yet. He shook his head without looking at me and said he couldn't. His voice sounded flat, like he had rehearsed the line. He said, "I can't watch her go again." Again. I wanted to ask what he meant, but the nurse at the station caught my eye and motioned me over. She spoke softly, explaining that my mom was fading, that she was in and out, that if I had anything I wanted to say, now was the time. Her tone was gentle but practiced. She said they had already offered Dad the same chance. He had refused. I went in alone. The room was dim except for the soft glow of the monitors, their green lines climbing and falling, stubborn proof that she was still here. The oxygen hissed quietly. Machines clicked and hummed with a rhythm that felt careless, almost bored. My mother, who had once terrified the neighbors with her laugh, seemed shrunken beneath the stiff white sheets. I said her name, not Mom, just to see if she would notice. Her eyelids fluttered, and she turned her head slightly in my direction. For a moment, she looked past me, like she was searching for someone taller, younger, smaller. Then her gaze settled on my face, and something like recognition tugged at the corner of her mouth. She whispered my childhood nickname, the one she used to shout out the back door when dinner was ready. She had not used it in years. Hearing it now felt like someone had cracked open my chest. I tried to smile. I leaned closer and told her I was here, that Ethan was on his way, that Dad was outside. She frowned faintly at the mention of my father, but her fingers, thin and bruised from IVs, lifted and reached toward me. I stepped closer so she didn't have to struggle. Her hand closed around my wrist with surprising strength. She stared straight into my eyes with a clarity that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. She whispered, "He's not your brother." My first reaction was to think I had misheard. I leaned closer and asked her what she meant, who she was talking about. She tightened her grip. It actually hurt. Her voice came out in a rasp, but the words were unmistakable this time. She said that my twin brother was not my brother by blood. She said it slowly, as if each word weighed something. I felt my throat go dry. I told her she must be confused, that Ethan and I were born minutes apart, that we had the same baby photos, the same hospital bracelets in the same little box she kept in her dresser. Her eyes filled with tears. She shook her head a fraction of an inch and whispered that she never wanted it to be like this. She said Dad had forced her to choose. I froze. For a few seconds, I tried to blame it on the medication. Morphine, pain, lack of oxygen. Brains do strange things at the end. I reminded myself of that as the monitor beeped steadily behind me, slow and hypnotic. But she didn't sound lost. She started talking about a clinic. Not the hospital, not the doctor's office. She used the word clinic in a way that made it sound secret. She said, "You were never supposed to know. We were supposed to take this to the grave." Her thumb, cold and dry, ran back and forth over my pulse like she was counting it. I asked her who we was. I asked what she meant about a choice. She swallowed, her throat bobbing in the harsh fluorescent light. Her gaze drifted to a spot over my shoulder, like she was watching a movie only she could see. She said there had been a real twin, the one they lost. She said Dad could not handle the emptiness. I felt the world tilt a little to the left. I asked her what that meant. Lost how? Stillborn? An accident? I kept asking, but my questions were stepping on each other. Her breathing hitched. The monitor began to protest in higher, faster tones. A nurse appeared at the doorway as if summoned by the sound, then another. They moved around me with controlled urgency, adjusting tubing, calling her name, urging her to stay with them. I backed up against the wall, my wrist suddenly empty where her hand had been. Even as they worked, my mother's eyes stayed locked on mine. She kept saying it over and over, weaker each time. "He's not your brother, not by blood." And then there was no more sound from her at all. They took the machines away eventually. They quieted the room. Someone pulled a sheet up over her chest and told me they were sorry. I stood there staring at the hollow where her body had made a small hill in the bed, and my mind kept replaying the same phrase. Forced her to choose. When I stepped back into the hallway, Dad was still in the chair. He looked up with an expression I could not read, some confused mix of expectation and dread. I told him she was gone. He nodded once, tightly, like I had confirmed something he already knew. Then he asked if she had said anything at the end. I told him exactly what she had said. His face changed. Not dramatically, not like in a movie, just a flicker. His eyelids lowered for a second too long. His jaw clenched. His grip on the armrest tightened until his knuckles blanched. Then he stood up and said the morphine made her confused, that people near the end mixed up dreams with memories. He told me not to start digging into things that did not matter. I reminded him she had mentioned a clinic, a real twin, a choice. I asked him how someone delirious could invent all that with that level of detail. He told me to let my mother rest. His voice had an edge to it now, something sharp under the words. He would not meet my eyes. Ethan arrived not long after that, moving down the hallway like he had run from the parking lot. His eyes were red, but his face looked strangely composed, almost blank. He hugged me, then tried to hug Dad. Dad's hands hovered awkwardly over his back, then dropped. For the first time, I noticed the distance between them, a subtle stiffness, like they were strangers playing at familiarity. That night, at home, I went into my parents' bedroom. The air still held her perfume, faint but stubborn. I opened her jewelry box, expecting to find what I always remembered. Tangled chains, single earrings whose partners had disappeared years ago, a watch that no longer ticked. Under the false bottom that I had never known was there, I found an envelope. It was old enough that the edges had gone soft and yellow, but my name on the front was clear in her handwriting. Beside it, there had once been another name. Someone had scratched it out so violently that the paper was torn through, the letters shredded beyond recognition. My heart started pounding as I turned the envelope over. On the back, in the same careful script I had seen on every birthday card of my childhood, she had written one sentence. "Forgive me, one of you is supposed to stay." I sat on the edge of my parents' bed with the envelope balanced on my knees, turning it over and over. My name on the front. The savaged wound of the other name beside it, torn through so completely there was only the ghost of ink in the fibers. I kept flipping back to the sentence on the back. "Forgive me, one of you was supposed to stay." The paper felt too light in my hands to hold anything that might rewire my entire life. But when I finally slid my finger under the flap and opened it, everything inside was heavier than it looked. The first thing that fell out was plastic. 2 tiny hospital bracelets curled in on themselves from age. The elastic was cloudy, stiff. The printed stickers were yellowed but still legible. On one, I recognized the last name, my parents' names, the ward, the date, my birthday. On the other, the last name was the same, but the baby ID number was different. And the date, 1 day later. They were supposed to be identical, twins born minutes apart, matching bracelets like a joke about how impossible it had been to tell us apart in the nursery. That was the story I had been told my entire life. That was the story printed in my baby book in Mom's looping handwriting. These bracelets did not match. Under them, folded neatly, was a photograph. The colors were faded, the edges soft, but I knew the layout immediately. Metal bassinet row, clear plastic cradles lined up like transparent drawers. I searched for 2 infants, side by side, the way I had always imagined. There were three tiny bundled shapes, 3 name cards clipped at the foot of each bassinet. The image was too blurry to make out the names, but one card was tilted toward the camera and I could see our last name printed twice, then scribbled over. The third card was turned away entirely. The last thing in the envelope was a copy of a discharge form, patient information, attending physician, neonatal notes, infant's name. Except the first infant name had been blanked out with correction fluid, the kind that dries chalky and always leaves the faintest outline beneath. The second infant line still showed the last name, but the first name was smeared, overwritten. At the bottom, someone had handwritten twins discharged in stable condition and initialed it. The date at the top of the form matched the later bracelet. My birth history, which I had always filed away as simple and sentimental. We were twins born on the same day, was suddenly threaded through with missing time and second attempts. 1 day apart. 2 bracelets. 3 babies. I called Ethan. He came over quicker than I expected. I did not even offer him a drink. I just led him to our parents' bedroom, sat him on the edge of the bed where I had been, and placed the contents of the envelope between us. He picked up one bracelet, then the other. I watched his eyes move from date to date. His fingers trembled enough that the plastic clicked softly against his wedding band. He told me Mom and Dad always said we were natural twins, all our lives. When I pointed to the dates and the photo with 3 infants, he put the picture down face first like he could shut it up. I asked him how he explained this. He said he did not want to. He said it did not matter that our whole lives had been built on the story we already had, and that picking at it would not change anything real. His voice kept getting thinner, stretched. When I kept pressing, when I asked him directly if he had ever heard anything, his shoulders slumped like I had finally hit the place he had been trying to protect. He said there was one thing. He told me about a night when we were kids. We had been sent to bed early after some forgotten argument about homework. He had crept back out to get water and heard our parents in the kitchen. Their voices low at first, then rising. He said he remembered Mom shouting, "You cannot just pretend he is ours because you could not let the other one go." He had never forgotten the way the word pretend had sounded in her mouth. He admitted that for years he had assumed he was the other one, the stand-in, the replacement. He never asked what it meant because he was terrified to hear it confirmed. He grabbed my wrist, almost the same way Mom had, and begged me to stop, to let it go. He said some truths do not make anything better. They just make everything before them feel like a lie. I told him it already did. The next day, while Dad pretended exhaustion and retreated behind closed blinds and a muted television, I stayed at the kitchen table with the discharge papers, turning them into a roadmap. In the top corner, under the hospital logo, there was a referral stamp for a separate facility. The ink was faint, half smudged, but the name of the clinic was still there. I looked it up. It was not a regular hospital. It was a private fertility and neonatal center, the kind that did not advertise on billboards but on discreet, tasteful websites full of smiling couples and vague promises. A blog post from years ago mentioned their reputation for handling delicate cases with discretion. I made an appointment and drove there the same afternoon. The building was smaller than I expected, all glass and quiet landscaping, like a bank that had decided to reinvent itself. Inside, everything was soft color and hushed voices. The receptionist greeted me with professional warmth, the kind that never quite becomes personal. When I slid the old paperwork across the counter and asked about archival records, her expression did not change at first. She took the papers, glanced down, and then her eyes snagged on the clinic stamp. Her face drained just enough color to be noticeable. She excused herself for a moment, papers in hand. When she came back, her smile felt brittle. She informed me they did not maintain records older than 20 years in their current system. Data migration issues, she said. Legacy corruption. She apologized in that way that meant there would be no exceptions. I told her I was not leaving without something. Anything. Before it could escalate, A man in a tailored suit appeared at my elbow, introduced himself as a director, and offered to speak in his office. The receptionist looked relieved when he took the papers from her. His office was careful. Diplomas on the wall, tasteful art, a window that looked out on a courtyard instead of the parking lot. He sat with the discharge form in front of him, steepling his fingers, choosing his words like stepping stones. He spoke about privacy, about confidentiality, about how sometimes in moments of crisis, families make decisions they later struggle to explain. He suggested, in that polished, non-committal way, that there might have been a neonatal loss, that another infant under tragic circumstances may have become available, that my parents had been desperate. He never said the words baby swap. He did not have to. When I asked him outright if my mother had left here with one baby or two, he smiled with professional sadness and repeated that without specific consent, he could not discuss individual patient histories. He was sorry for my loss. He wished me peace. I walked out of the clinic feeling like my skin did not fit right. In the parking lot, I was halfway to my car when a woman in scrubs hurried out through a side door, glancing over her shoulder as if to make sure no one followed. She called my name. She was younger than the others inside, her badge slightly crooked, a pen stuck in her hair. She said she had seen my papers at the front desk. She said she had been curious. Her voice dropped when she reached me. She told me their current system really did not go back that far, but there was an older archive, a half-forgotten database that they were supposed to be phasing out. She had searched my mother's name there. She said there were 3 infant entries linked to my mother's file. One listed as primary live birth, one listed as twin live birth, and one listed as non-survivor. She held my gaze for a long second, then shook her head. "Your mother did not lose one baby," she said quietly. "She left with 2. Before I could react, she pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand. She said she had printed it before anyone noticed. She told me to be careful who I showed it to. When I opened the paper, my breath caught. There, in black and white, was the full name of the non-survivor. The first name leapt off the page, a perfect match to the shredded ink shadow on the envelope at home. It was the name my mother had tried to erase. Caleb. I stared at the name on the printout until the letters stopped looking like a word. Caleb, my supposed non-survivor. The twin who was never meant to leave the clinic. The one Mom had written, then scratched out, on an envelope addressed to me. The one she had tried to bury under layers of white-out polite lies and Dad's stubborn silence. On the drive home, I kept seeing the 3 bassinets from the photo, looping in my mind like a film reel with one frame missing. Me, Ethan, Caleb. One of us was sick. One of us was swapped. One of us was supposed to be dead. I needed proof that did not depend on anyone's memory. The next morning, I texted Ethan and told him I had done something impulsive. When he came over, I sat him at the kitchen table and slid a small kit across to him. Cheek swabs, barcodes, instructions, all very clinical, reassured, framed as science and reassurance instead of suspicion. I told him I had ordered a DNA test. "Just to confirm the twin thing," I said, trying to sound light. "For peace of mind, to shut my brain up." He stared at the box like it might open its own mouth and speak. For a second, I thought he would refuse. Then his shoulders dropped and he gave a small, exhausted nod. "If this proves you wrong," he said quietly, "you have to promise to let it go." I promised, even though I already knew I would not. We followed the instructions, swabs, little plastic vials, stickers with impersonal strings of numbers. I mailed the kit and tried to live normally while the days crawled past. But every time I looked at Ethan, I saw 2 shadows behind his eyes. The night he had heard our parents arguing, and the word pretend. When the email finally arrived, I opened it alone in my living room, the glow of the laptop the only light. The results were laid out in tidy tables and percentages, the mess of human biology reduced to clean lines. I scrolled straight to the section I needed. Biological relationship. Subject A and Subject B. No direct biological relation detected. My heart lurched. I scrolled again, thinking I had misread. We shared no more DNA than strangers on the street. The algorithm labeled us no significant relation. Not half siblings, not cousins, nothing. I checked the parental matches. Subject B enlisted parent 1, not a biological match. Subject B enlisted parent 2, not a biological match. Ethan did not match either of our parents. Not as a full child, not as a half child, not at all. Whatever Caleb had been, whatever he was supposed to be, Ethan was not him. Ethan was nobody's blood in this house. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped my phone when I called Dad. He tried to push me off again at first, mumbling about grief and timing and how this was not the moment to dig up old ground. So I went to him instead. Results printed. The nurse's note about Caleb folded in my pocket. The name itself lodged behind my teeth. I found him in his armchair, the television on mute, the remote in his hand like a prop. He did not turn the sound up when I sat opposite him. He did not look surprised to see me. I put the DNA report on the coffee table between us. I tested us, I said. Me and Ethan. Then Ethan and you. Ethan and Mom. He did not reach for the papers. I watched his eyes flick to the logo at the top, then to the dense block of numbers beneath, then back to my face. And? He asked, but his voice already held the answer. I am your child, I said. Ethan is not. Not yours. Not Mom's. Not my twin. Not related to any of us by blood. Something inside his face finally broke. He sagged back into the chair, and for the first time since the hospital, I saw something beyond denial. Guilt, fear, a kind of worn-out tenderness that had nowhere left to hide. He said the hospital had told them one of the twins was very ill, that the doctors did not expect him to live more than a few days. He said your mother held you both and refused to put either of you down, but he could see the edges of her collapsing each time they mentioned palliative care. He could not stand the idea of going home with one empty arm. At the clinic, he said, there was another baby, a newborn from a complicated situation, a mother who had signed forms and never returned, staff who spoke in euphemisms about placement and options. They asked if he and Mom would consider taking the child. Quietly. The paperwork was dense and strange, and he signed where they pointed, hands shaking, eyes fixed on the idea of 2 car seats in the back instead of one. Mom had hesitated, he admitted. She had asked whether it was right, whether the sick twin would still be treated the same, whether they were trying to buy their way out of grief. He told her a son was a son, that biology was just a word. He said they were already his in his heart. He pressed his palms over his eyes, fingers digging into his temples. Your mother wanted to tell you later, he said hoarsely. When you were older, I said no. I thought love would be enough. I thought truth would only hurt. I asked him about Caleb, the real twin, the sick one, the one listed as non-survivor in a system that also said my mother left with 2 babies. He said the doctors had transferred the ill twin to another facility for experimental treatment. A last effort, a trial, words that sounded hopeful and hopeless at the same time. Mom had visited, he said. He had refused to go, convinced that keeping distance would make it easier when the inevitable happened. They told us he passed, he whispered. Your mother came home with that story and I believed her. I had to. We already had 2 babies in cribs. I thought if I opened the door to that pain, I would never close it again. When I told him about the nurse, his head snapped up. The nurse said Mom did not lose 1 child, I said slowly. She said Mom left with 2. For the first time, his bewilderment felt real, not defensive, not evasive. He shook his head, over and over. I do not know what she did on those last visits, he said. I only know what she chose to tell me. That night, after he fell into a hollow sleep on the couch, I went back into my parents' bedroom. The jewelry box, the envelope, the yellowed photo of 3 bassinets. I searched deeper this time, feeling along the back of drawers, lifting frames, checking any place a person might tuck something they could not bear to throw away. Behind one framed family photo on the dresser, wedged between the cardboard and the stand, I found it. An unmarked picture, edges bent from being hidden. It showed a toddler standing in a park, one hand on a low fence, the other reaching toward the camera. Dark hair. The same cowlick in the front that never stayed down. The same eyes I saw in the mirror every morning. The resemblance made my chest tighten. This child looked more like me than Ethan ever had. Beside the toddler stood a woman I did not recognize. Not Mom. Her hair was pulled back, her smile small and uncertain. She was angled toward the child in a way that spoke of habit, not posing. On the back of the photo, in Mom's careful handwriting, was a date from years after we had already been brought home. And beneath it, a short line that made my hands go cold. I'm sorry I couldn't keep you both. I stared at the looping letters, then back at the child with my face and the stranger holding their hand. And suddenly the word non-survivor felt less like a fact and more like a decision someone had made. My twin might not be dead at all. He might have been raised by the woman in the photo, out there somewhere with my eyes and my name buried under a life my mother never told anyone about.